Now I ask the Jean-Christophe Bast, he's the CEO of Connectors for Peace, as our last speaker, but not least. He's currently, as I said, the CEO for Connectors for Peace organization. He's the former CEO and Executive Board Chairman of the Dialogue of Civilizations Research Institute, a position he has held up to September 2018. Previously, he was also the head of strategy and development of the United Nations Alliance of Civilization between 2008 and 2014. And also, he was the head of the policy dialogue of the World Bank between 1999 and 2008, and also director of democratic citizenship and participation of the Council of Europe between 2014 and 2015, and the first director of the Aspen Institute in France between 1994 and 1999. Of course, he's also the author of Europe à la carte, which addresses the issue of European identity. You've got the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your gracious words of introduction. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's a great pleasure to be here. Also, I'm well aware that being the last speaker in the last session, in the last day of this forum, and on top of that, right before lunch, that my task is certainly impossible to expect to be heard. But nevertheless, I would like to say a few words of gratitude and to thank the Albabtain Foundation and the Republic of Malta for their hospitality and organizing this very timely forum. I'd like to express to Chairman Albabtain and President of Malta my gratitude, Mr. Touhami also for putting together this event, and also to all speakers this morning and yesterday. I think I learned a great deal. These were very inspiring words, and it's good to, and also reassuring to see that today and yesterday, we were all together as champions for peace. And in a way, I'd also like to stress, how much I was inspired last night to read this book from the Chairman Albabtain, and I think this book should be almost mandatory in schools around the world, and probably the world would be a better place if everyone would read this book. And Mr. Chairman, as you have been using this beautiful image of just peace being a candle, be assured that we are certainly all committed here to maintain this flame alive and vibrant, and that even so we are in a very difficult circumstances, there is still people committed to peace, and that peace will prevail. Let me very briefly, because I know time is very short, to introduce, maybe that's my privilege being the last speaker of this, at least of this session, to introduce a perspective that is based actually on research and academic evidence. And even so, since last week, we are living in a very different world. The reality of the post-Cold War, as shown by research by UNESCO, but also by the Heidelberg Institute for International Conflict, shows that most conflict in the world today are not conflict between member states, but they are within countries. And what we are witnessing, again, based on those research, is that 2/3 or even more of the conflict today are rooted in culture, in cultural divide, in ethnic divide, in a way, identity. And in a way, it's quite striking to see that most conflict today are domestic conflict and opposing different people from different culture, different identity. And in a way, we see more and more countries in different parts of the world that are in a way coming closer to sort of civil war. There is a situation that we have never been witnessing, or not in the recent time, and we see increasingly societies that are fractured, that are divided, and the dividing line, which used to be during the Cold War and until a recent time, ideology, is now between identity. So we have moved from dividing lines that were based on ideology to identity. And, you know, of course, we can take multiple examples, but at the Connectors for Peace, we have developed this sort of theory or observation of two major dividing lines. One that we call the vertical dividing line, which is between, let's say, the globalist and the localist, two group of people who are having very different perspective. Those who are having exclusively the global perspective, who are very agile, speaking languages, navigating a global world, and who are losing a sense of, in a way, their roots and tradition and culture. And at the other side of the spectrum, you have the people who are, let's say, the localists, who are profoundly and deeply entrenched in their culture and tradition, and those two groups are increasingly moving in opposite direction, dismissing each other, hating each other. And then you have the horizontal divide that is between the secular and the religious. Those who consider that religion has nothing to do with society, nothing to do with public policy, nothing to do, this is purely private. And then you have at the other side of the spectrum those who consider that we as individuals are nothing but the emanation of a transcendental spirit and religion, and that religion should take over public policies, but also the public space. And these, again, are two tribes or two groups that are going increasingly in opposite direction. And then you have multiple of those dividing lines, you know, between the LGBT and the family-oriented group, between the abortion and pro-life, between the climate activists and those who refuse or ignore, between the vegetarians and the carnivore. And these are multiple topics that are fracturing our societies and that are leading, and we see, again, in many parts of the world, countries that are on the verge to, in a way, to collapse, or where society are so divided that there is almost nothing left in terms of a common denominator. And also with social media, with also sometimes the decline of the role and the power and the influence of politicians, hate speech, fake news are giving even more voice to those who are at the extreme. And we see societies that are increasingly polarized. But in a way, the reality of our societies is not at those extremes. Those extremes are very much heard because of social media that are, in a way, demultiplying their voice. But the reality of our society is in between those groups. People who, in a way, oscillate between those extremes. And that's, in a way, what we call the silent majority of the moderates. And one, if not the major imperative for political leaders, for civil society, for media, for everyone, is to strengthen the voice of the moderate. And because in a way, and that's the topic today, is that, of course, government can play a tremendous role through public policy and regulation to prevent or to mitigate the risk of tensions. But the reality is that in a way, you don't touch the mind and the heart of people with public policy. And this is where comes into play the connectors. The connectors are a whole range of groups and activities whose core business is to connect people. If you take, I know that time is short, but I would just like to make my point in 1 minute, if you allow me. If you take sports, if you take music, if you take entertainment, if you take the arts, if you take the whole range of sectors, they are convening and connecting people regardless of their belief, regardless of their identity. If you and I are going to a stadium or a music arena or wherever, we don't ask our neighbor what is his or her political, sexual, food, religious orientation. We are in the stadium because we are willing to share our passion for sport, and this is a way of building common societies. Therefore, what we are doing at Connectors for Peace, working very closely with UNESCO and a wide range of partners around the world, is really to make those connectors, sport federation, art, entertainment, film industry, to make them aware of their role, of their responsibility, and their capacity, because they are touching the mind and the heart of people, that they can be peace changers and they can be the peace advocates. So this is what we are doing. Unfortunately, time is too short to go into details, but I just would like to say that our goal is really to create a world coalition of like-minded organizations, really to give a voice and to support, again, the politicians and government whose role is indispensable but not sufficient to promote peace and cohesion society. So we need really to create this coalition and to engage all those economic and arts and cultural sector to become the peace advocate. And in that respect, we are certainly very keen to work with, of course, the Albabtain Foundation and to join forces, because I think the task is so huge that if we really want to have an impact, we need to work together and we need to join forces. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.